For over 20 years, Steam has been the undisputed king of PC gaming. But in February 2026, a massive report from The Guardian revealed a growing rebellion. A group of developers are speaking out, and their target isn't a rival console. It's the very thing that makes Steam work, the user review system. The report titled, "This Shouldn't Be Normal, Developers Speak Out About Bigotry on Steam," paints a picture of a platform in chaos. Multiple creators are describing what they call ineffective moderation and unchecked hatred. They want Valve to step in. They want reviews deleted. They want the culture wars scrubbed from their store pages. But Valve isn't budging. In fact, their response to these demands has been one of the most significant defenses of platform neutrality we've seen in years. Today, we're looking at why some developers think Steam is broken and why Valve believes that fixing it their way would actually be the ultimate act of censorship. The primary argument from the developers is that Steam has become a quote-unquote battleground. Take designer Lawhead, for example. Lawhead spent 2 years trying to get specific reviews removed from their game pages. One review of the game Blue Suburbia was objectively personal, referencing Lawhead's private life and physical appearance. Lawhead told The Guardian, "I assumed reporting Steam abuse might have its own issues, but I did have hope that this would be the way to get it resolved." Then there's the case of Coven, an action horror game. The developer Ethan claims he was targeted by a curator called Charlie Tweets Detected. This curator doesn't review games based on graphics or gameplay, they review them based on what the developer said about Charlie Kirk. Ethan reported this to Steam support, arguing it was off topic, but look at how Steam responded. They defined off topic as a recipe for cookies, or something completely unrelated to video games that is clearly trolling. Because the review was tied to the developer of the game, Steam let it stand. To these developers, this feels like an ultimate act of betrayal. Amy of Studio Plain Toast stated Valve's refusal to moderate any of this is making Steam reviews and forums the battleground for some kind of culture war. It's making them unsafe for marginalized people. But this isn't just about small indie games either. We are seeing this play out with massive projects that have recently crashed and burned. Just look at Highguard. When the game launched, it was met with a very negative rating almost instantly. The developers at Wildlight Studio didn't just take the L, they blamed the hate mobs. A former developer who got let go reflected on the launch, saying, "We were turned into a joke from minute one." They argue that dishonest critiques of their characters and anti-woke sentiment killed the game before it had a chance. But if you look at the reviews, the players are saying something different. They're saying the game was boring, the art style was unattractive, and they didn't want another live service clone. By asking Steam to moderate these reviews, the developers are essentially asking Steam to hide the fact that the market has rejected their product. Mike Rose, head of No More Robots, recently went public because Valve rejected a complaint about a review that said woke game also has Muslims. Rose argued that racism is against guidelines and should be a no-brainer for removal, but Valve's response was silent. They didn't delete it, because the moment Valve starts verifying what is a valid opinion on a group of people, they become an editorial board, not a storefront. So what we're seeing here in 2026 is an accountability crisis. In the past, if a game failed, the developers went back to the drawing board to figure out where it went wrong. Today, they just go ahead and complain to Steam. By grouping legitimate criticism with bigotry, developers are attempting to create a world where any dissent or negative review is a violation of safety. They are essentially asking Valve to ignore the data, which is very similar to the Relooted strategy. When CEO Ben Myers blames YouTubers and bad faith actors, he is asking for a version of Steam where only approved opinions are allowed to affect a game's visibility. So if Valve would hypothetically fall to this pressure, the Steam review score would become as useless as a paid-for critic score on a corporate site. But here's where things get interesting. As most tech giants usually cave under this kind of pressure, Valve operates very differently. With only 300 employees managing 42 million concurrent users, Valve relies on a philosophy of radical neutrality. When Lawhead pushed Steam to remove those reviews, Steam support wrote, we aren't in a position to verify the accuracy of statements made in user reviews, and we don't try to moderate reviews based on accuracy. Valve went even further, explicitly stating that removing these reviews could be seen as censorship. This is a massive statement. Valve is essentially saying that once they start deciding which mean reviews are accurate and which ones are harassment, they become the arbiters of truth, and Valve has no interest in being your moral compass. Another developer received a similar response after reporting transphobic comments. It's much better to continue working on the product while letting the community use the helpfulness feature to surface reviews that they agree with or find to be uninformed. And this is the Steam way. If a review is bad or bigoted or stupid, Valve expects the users to vote it down into irrelevance. They believe in the helpful button more than the delete button. The developers in the Guardian report argue that because Steam is a near monopoly, it has a monumental responsibility to protect them. They say a single negative rating can mean the difference between success and failure, and in a way they are right, it can, but that's exactly why the system must remain uncensored. If Valve starts deleting reviews because a developer finds them insincere or bigoted, where does it stop? Does a review complaining about woke characters get deleted? What about a review complaining about bad optimization that the dev claims is fixed? What about a review that calls a dev lazy? The moment Valve begins verifying accuracy, every developer on the platform will flood them with tickets demanding the removal of every negative review that isn't 100% technical. We would see the death of the mixed rating. Every game would just be overwhelmingly positive because any negative review would just get deleted. The report quotes developer Fee saying, "To us, it seemed that in Steam's view, hateful comments about an individual is abuse, but targeting it towards a group of people is totally fine." And while that sounds harsh, it reveals the core of the friction. Steam treats groups as topics. If you make a game about a specific political identity, the community is going to discuss that identity. You cannot invite the world to look at your art and then demand they only speak about it in ways you find safe. But for the consumer, Steam is a marketplace of ideas. When you see a game with mostly negative reviews, it's just a large warning. Sometimes that warning is about bugs, sometimes it's about a developer's behavior, and sometimes it's about the woke content the developer is pushing. The point is, the customer gets to decide what information is relevant to them. So the Guardian article concludes with Lawhead saying, "This shouldn't be normal, but for millions of people who use Steam every day, this is the normal they want. They want the raw, unfiltered, and sometimes ugly truth of the community's opinion. Steam's refusal to moderate accuracy isn't a failure of the system, it's actually a feature that keeps the system honest." So Valve has made its choice. They are choosing the chaos of the public square over the safety of the gated community, and as long as they do, Steam will remain the only place where the users, not the corporations, have the final word. But overall, what do you think? Is Valve justified in protecting mean reviews to avoid censorship?